All right. At the heart of this gospel reading is the idea of the sacred call. Jesus meets Simon Peter, Andrew, James, and John for the first time, and all four of them are fishermen. And Jesus says, "Come after me, and I will make you fishers of men." And that's exactly what they do. So the first thing I would like for us to clarify today is to dispel the idea that these four guys basically had nothing to live for, and therefore it was easy to follow Christ. I love Jim Gaffigan. He makes a joke along those lines, but it's simply not true. These four people were fishermen, and that was a good trade. They had nets and other equipment, but most importantly, they had a boat. With James and John, it was very specific in the text. With Simon, Peter, and Andrew, it's implied that they had a boat. If they were casting nets into the sea on the shore, that's possible, but that's not a very efficient way to fish on the Sea of Galilee. So let's assume they were good at their jobs and they were fishing from a boat. When you hear about fishing in the Bible, it's never some guy with a pole and a worm on a hook. Fishing took place on the water. So these four guys either had a boat or access to a boat, and that is a precious resource. At least one of these boats from this era of history has survived to the present day. You can see it in a museum in Israel. It's probably not the one the disciples had, but it was the same kind of boat from the same period of history. And we know from studying this relic just how much the owners cared for these vessels. Because again, if you go to this museum in Israel, this boat has wood from a dozen different kinds of trees. Okay, so this boat has been patched and repaired so often, the diagram of it looks like a boat-shaped puzzle. The point being, boats of this sort were not the sorts of things you throw away and then you just buy another one or build another one. No, like this was an investment. This was your livelihood. And for people of that era of history, it would have been insane to abandon it along with your profession. And that's what the four of the soon-to-be disciples did. So any way you look at it, it was a big deal, and it was a radical decision to follow Christ. And that's what a sacred call is all about in the first place. Leave behind that which you know and follow me to something greater. God probably doesn't make that deal for us every day, but he does make it to all of us. How many times do we get a call like that in life? I have no idea. It's probably different person to person anyway, but I do believe that everyone gets at least one sacred call. I feel confident enough about that. And God does this. He reaches out to us because he loves us, he cares for us, and he wants us to grow and flourish as the people we've always been meant to be. And there are so many obstacles that get in the way of that. Our spiritual development can be hampered by corrupt politics, an unpopular decision from the church or from the pastor. It can be damaged by personal loss or tragedy like a failed marriage. Ignorance will certainly do it. And even something like excessive piety. I mean, it seems like faith is a fragile thing because everything in life has the power to damage it. And yet, by the grace of God, here we are enduring as a people of God. So God reaches out to us, and this sacred call is done for that sake, to keep us on point. And it's meant, the sacred call, it's meant to pierce the armor of one specific but major obstacle to our spiritual well-being. And we all know what this obstacle is in our own way. I call it the laziness of familiarity. That's when we get accustomed to a particular way of life, and our passion and our hope just sort of dry up over time. And once that happens, every day becomes identical to the one before it, and we do the same things over and over again, not because we love them, not because they're important, but because they're familiar. And God doesn't want that for any of us. To get up, go to work, make spreadsheets for 8 hours, come home, frozen pizza and TV, go to bed, repeat ad nauseum. That's not the idea. If you do the same thing day after day, let it be so for a reason. Because after all, that's what a monk does. For all intents and purposes, a monk does the same thing day after day for most of their lives. That is their vocation. But they don't do it at the price of their passion, their hope, or their joy. And that's where this sacred call really comes in. It's God knocking at your door, and maybe you're expecting him, maybe it's a surprise visit, but he's knocking all the same, and it's God. He knows you're home. So he's knocking, and he's saying, today's the day. You have stayed at home with familiar things long enough, and it's time for something new. And God help us, we need that. We need to be pushed or pulled out of the rut that can become our life. Sometimes that involves an addition to our own lives, to our old lives. That means a new hobby or a volunteer opportunity. It means being a good Samaritan and helping us shovel the walkway for absolutely no reward. Thank you to whoever that was. Other times, it's a subtraction from our old life, like kicking a bad habit. And sometimes, that sacred call is a complete break from our old life, and that's what the disciples had in the gospel today. So please, I want you to think for a little bit about the last time you experienced a change of that nature. If you need more time than this second today in church, think about it on the way home after Mass. It is my hope that when you remember that major change in your life, you also remember the sensation of energy and excitement that came with it, because when the Holy Spirit is with us, we move with purpose. We do things for a reason. And that's wonderful. It's when we're spiritually stagnant, that's when we tend to live our lives on autopilot. So seriously, look back at these last few days or weeks of your life. Were there times where you hopped out of bed in the morning because you knew that there was important work for you to accomplish that day, whether it was at the office or not? If that is the case, well done. Keep it up. Go with God. But on the other hand, did you have days where the highlight of your day was watching TikTok videos and eating junk food? Now, don't get me wrong, we all need days like that. If you have a couple of days like that, I don't think that's anything to be alarmed about. But if that was the best that your day had to offer you for the majority of your days, if that's the best your life is for most of your days, well, that might be a sign that you're stuck in the laziness of familiarity, and you might be past due for a sacred call. So if that's the case, be sure to listen and pay attention, because Christ will call you. And if you come after him, he will make you fishers of men. And your life will never be the same or dull ever again.